Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's not
Good.
as hot here as it ever is everywhere else.
Congratulations.
So we're basking in beautiful weather.
So today's Thursday. We should have said that last week. We're recording on Thursday this week, and we did last week in case there's any big story we missed that breaks on Friday. This probably won't persist, but we don't know. What's that?
We're going to miss the big Tucker Carlson debate, which isn't really a debate. It's just him interviewing candidates seriatim.
On Twitter?
No, in Iowa.
Oh.
The crucial first caucus in the nation state.
Wait, who's going to be there? Well, actually, you know what? The news quiz I'm going to lead with may lead toward this.
Okay. Shoot.
Your news quiz has four parts. Okay.
Okay.
We'll get back to Tucker one way or the other.
Getting complicated.
And it's going to get worse in coming weeks. So I'm going to give you a part of a headline. You're going to tell me who it refers to. It's one of those headlines that, like, so-and-so on so-and-so, quote, like Bob on Mickey, quote, nice guy, not that bright or something, right? It's that kind of format. I'm not going to tell you the first part. I'm just going to tell you what's in quotes, and then you tell me who it refers to. Okay, here's what's in quotes. They can smell a loser. Now, who is the loser and who is they?
Donors, Ron DeSantis.
1 for 2. It was the Murdochs, who I guess are potential donors, so let's give you full credit. Ron DeSantis smells like a loser, Mickey. That hurts, I know.
They're idiots.
Okay. This is a Rolling Stone headline, and Rolling Stone, it's not exactly.
They want Glenn Youngkin, and they want immigration amnesty, and DeSantis isn't going to give it to them. So
okay. Before we get back to that, part 2 of the news quiz. Who said this or wrote this? Politics and hard news are inevitably going to show up, but we're not going to do anything to encourage those verticals.
A guy named Mosseri, who is a big mocker at Threads, and they later tried to walk it back, but first thought, most accurate thought, he doesn't want politics on the site. All the liberals who think Threads is going to be their political salvation are barking up the wrong tree. They're going to get celebrity videos from influencers and creators, and it's going to be a pile of crap like Facebook and Instagram.
I can't believe you even knew the guy's name. So he's the guy who runs, well, for one thing, Instagram, but also Threads. Are you hacking my computer? Are you part of a Mossad operation?
It was one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Whoa. So we'll get back to that. Okay. You're killing it. You're 2 for 2. This one you should, I think, if you're an attentive news consumer, you should get this one. Who called what, quote, unprecedented and absurd?
God, there's so many things that are like that.
Well, yes.
It's probably foreign policy, because you haven't had one lately. Cluster bombs.
No, that's a good example of something we missed by virtue of taping last Thursday. We may come back to those. I'll give you the full quote. It's unprecedented and absurd when a time frame is not set up either for the invitation nor for Ukraine's membership.
Oh, the Zelensky complaining about NATO.
Zelensky complaining. He wasn't right about unprecedented, because this is what they did in 2008. I mean, with some variation, but this is what set us on the current path. The idea of vaguely promising this thing that may or may not happen. Final question. And you still have a chance for, getting like a B+. But this one's tough. This one is tough. Here's the quote. As many commanders of regiments and divisions said today, our army was not broken through the front, but our most senior commander hit us in the back, thus treacherously beheading the army in the most difficult period. You don't have to know his name.
It's somebody complaining about Prigozhin, but I don't know who it is.
No, it's not, actually. It's somebody who sounds remarkably like Prigozhin. It is this General Popov. I think this is the biggest story out of Ukraine over the last few days.
This is Spartacus.
I guess. I haven't seen that movie. What does Spartacus do?
I don't know either. He hangs by a cross on the Appian Way, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But
and who plays Spartacus? Kirk
Burt
Douglas?
Lancaster.
Oh, Burt Lancaster. Okay, I digress.
Jeez.
So this is a 2-star Russian general named Popov, who was commander of the 58th Army, which is right on the front there in Zaporizhia and is big. I mean, if he's a 2-star, I got to figure, this is tens of thousands of men he's commanding. And what happened was he got relieved of duty and then went through and said, well, what happened was he was listing his grievances to, it was either Gerasimov or Shoigu, but anyway, one of Prigozhin's targets, right? And complaining that they aren't getting the support, we're not getting the, certain things about artillery, and on and on and on and on. And it's tough up here. And then they fired him. They relieved him of duty, and now he is kind of rebelling against the exact same guys Prigozhin was rebelling against. And as Sam Cherub said on Twitter, he's at the Rand Corporation. This Popov story is in some ways far more damaging for Russian morale than the entire Prigozhin episode, since the latter was always outside the chain of command. Does seem weird. I don't know. I mean, it suggests too. You go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, it suggests, first of all, that things are tough on the front. The Ukrainian offensive itself doesn't look to be doing any better than it was last week. Incremental gains up north. The Russians are gaining ground, I think, north of Bakhmut, all the way in Luhansk. But this suggests that maybe there is a lot of pressure on the Russian troops. So for Ukrainians who are saying, look, if we persist, they're going to break, there's going to be a big breakthrough, I guess this is encouraging. But plus, it's like this is a very high level, chain of command public dissent. It's the kind of thing that, I mean, nothing like this has happened that I'm aware of in the United States since MacArthur, disobeyed Truman, right? I mean, and this isn't even the same thing. It's not disobeying an order, but the degree of
Obama fired McChrystal.
But that was bullshit in terms of what he did. McChrystal didn't even. The claim was you can't go around disrespecting the president and not expect, and expect not to get punished. And it's true that Rolling Stone had quoted him saying disrespectful things, but he hadn't said them to the reporter. The reporter had claimed that anonymous sources claim that this general said them to the anonymous sources. Well, generals do this shit all the time. Even if you assume he did it, that's not like speaking out publicly. He didn't speak to a reporter. He didn't speak out publicly. So this is really weird by our standards. And you kind of wonder how much of all this Putin has been actually aware of, because people say he doesn't use the internet. I mean, has he ever seen a Prigozhin video where Prigozhin's going berserk? Like, I don't know. I really don't know.
There was a story that Gerasimov had been fired, and then he turned up again later in the week, fired.
Not so far.
So he's a Schrodinger's cat of a general. There was a theory that Prigozhin, his failed coup just made it easier for other people to make trouble, and this would fit in with that. But what's this guy got to do now?
Well, I mean, he was already fired. I don't think he was kicked out of the military, but in effect, he was.
Is he going to start a podcast? I mean, what's going to happen?
I think he has a future in podcasting, but so it's not as weird as it would be if he started talking like this while still in command. But it's like things are there. There does seem to be a certain amount of resentment of Gerasimov and Shoigu at the high levels. And, we still haven't seen this guy, Surovikin, this general who has not been seen publicly since the mutiny. So I don't know.
It's easier to call them by their nicknames.
What's Surovikin's nickname?
He's Armageddon.
He's General Armageddon, yeah, because of his
and the other one
reference
is
to his Syria. Is the other one called Spartacus?
I think so. Does the Russian media pick up on this? Does anybody in Russia know about this?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, for one thing, there's this whole Telegram infrastructure, regardless of what officially approved state media is saying on TV. And Telegram, reaches a lot of people. I don't know what they're saying on state TV, but anyway, seems weird. Aside from that, I think the only thing I'd say about Ukraine, well, there is the NATO thing, but that's, and there's cluster musicians. But first, let me say, I taped the podcast with the Russians with Attitude guys. I mean, I taped their podcast yesterday, which isn't out yet. And
I watched something on your site.
You did watch part of the one I did with them on my podcast?
I watched an hour and like 20 minutes of a podcast on your site that then it went up to the Parrot Room or went up to the paid behind the paywall.
You didn't pay to go behind the paywall? I'm kind of offended.
I've already paid to go behind the paywall, but I didn't. Are you a
paid subscriber to Nonzero newsletter?
Probably, yeah.
Probably, yeah. Anyway, when I talked to them on theirs, one of them said something that's relevant to, remember a few weeks before the offensive, I said, I think they should use their freshly equipped brigades to just play defense, because if they exhaust themselves in an offensive, they may be vulnerable to a big Russian counteroffensive. Who knows where they'll stop? At one point, I even mentioned Odessa, which is on the other side of the Dnipro. And one of these guys did say that from a Russian national security point of view, and national security isn't their main reason for supporting the invasion. That is the RWA guys. But they did say they think it's Putin's main reason for invading. They said that on my podcast, but on their podcast, which hasn't been released yet, he said from a national security perspective, Odessa is a very important city. They would very much like to have it. It has to do with naval deployments in the Black Sea. I don't understand, but that's just something to keep in mind. As far if Ukrainian generals are deciding at this moment whether to follow my advice and play defense and be careful in expending resources, something to keep in mind.
Well, I commend you for doing that interview. I learned a lot, even from the freebie hour and 20 minutes. They seem like rational people who one should pay attention to. But you didn't ask the obvious question, which is, if their motivation was not national security, it was they were involved in the Donbass and the oppression, they thought, of the Russian-speaking people in the Donbass who did not want to associate with the Maidan revolution. And if that was the goal, why does Putin have to go all the way to Kiev to accomplish that? He has to take the Donbass. So why are they defending a war that strikes at the heart of a much more legitimate Ukraine state?
Well, I would say two things. First of all, as a number of people kind of said what you said, well, except in more derogatory terms. They said, wait a second, they favored the invasion just because they thought that Russian speakers in the Donbass faced, discriminatory language laws or something. And it wasn't, it was just that. It's that when these people protested and did what the RWA guys said is exactly what the protesters had done in 2014 in Kyiv, in the Maidan Revolution. They were met with aerial bombardment and artillery. I mean, they didn't mess around. That they were subjected to military assault. Like, they occupied buildings to dramatize their grievances the way the protesters did, and bombs start falling, at least by their account. So that was their big issue. But it's, your question is a good one. I don't know exactly what they'd say. I would say that, the predominantly Russian-speaking areas go beyond the two famous parts of the Donbass. We didn't get into this, but I know that sometime way back, like I think before 2014, there were referenda in the provinces about which provinces wanted autonomy. And Kharkiv voted yes, along with Donetsk and Luhansk. So you can get pretty close to Kyiv and still have, at least as the map was before the war started, a heavily Russian-speaking population. I mean, also, I think they. I mean, look. I mean, are you saying in their view, the idea of going to Kyiv, I don't think was to, in the long run, occupy it or occupy Ukraine in that vicinity. I think it was to affect regime change. You know, that Putin thought he had it kind of wired. He thought he had the whole thing wired, almost like he'd had Crimea wired in 2014.
So they want to decapitate a legitimately elected government in a state that should probably exist, even if it shouldn't include the Donbass. And if you're also going to get a lot of grief from commenters who are going to say a majority of even Russian speakers in the Donbass don't want to be part of Russia. They'd rather stay in Ukraine. I remember that was
look, I'm not
a theme earlier.
No, I'm not here to defend anything, and I don't know the demographics. I mean, I would also say the Russian-speaking population also extends in the south, and even Odessa was, again, things shift and change, but as of 15, 20 years ago, it had at least as many native Russian speakers, I think. But I don't look. I don't know. I mean, you know, they may have figured, well, this isn't exactly the invasion we would have designed, but we want the people of the Donbass to get whatever. And I don't know.
There was an interesting article by Edward Luchvak in Unheard, I think, or somewhere, where he claims that, contrary to popular opinion, they all want a negotiated settlement. He claims Putin obviously is not doing the gung-ho all-out war that he could have, in part because he doesn't want to call up conscripts and deal with the mothers of the conscripts. And so he has sort of a deal like Johnson in Vietnam, which is he thinks he can wage this war without disturbing the rest of society, and he could wage it for a long time. But the idea is that he's going to, you know, he implied that he would be happy to settle because, you know,
well, that's what these guys said on my podcast.
He implied that we want to settle, and he said that I think he said that Zelensky has a plan to settle. He will tell you after this offensive, we're going to be here and here and here, and we're going to settle. Which leads to the question: why don't they get on with it if they all want to settle? And he didn't have a really good answer for that.
Well, right now, Zelensky is saying he absolutely won't settle publicly. He's saying he will not even sit down and talk until they have left all of Ukraine, including Crimea. So, but Putin hasn't ruled it out in those kind of absolute terms at all. But and look, I don't know whether it's Zelensky himself or whether he has certain pressures on him. He might cite popular opinion, although I think that's more malleable and subject to his own influence than we might think. Yeah, he's the one saying they don't. My sense is that the U.S., it's weird. On the one hand, you know, you sometimes get the impression that Ukraine felt pressured by the U.S. to do this offensive and show these gains so that they can get more equipment and will keep investing in the war effort. On the other hand, you sometimes get the impression that the U.S. just, you know, it feels like, well, we'd like a ceasefire now, but Ukraine really wants to do this offensive, so we'll let them try, and then if they fail, they'll see they got to settle. I don't know who's thinking what. Again, there is the concern, I'll say for the 50th time, that in the course of the offensive, they will exhaust themselves sufficiently to entice Russia into a big counteroffensive that then starts the whole thing all over again. That's my concern.
What has the neocon argument that we like Ukraine keeping up with the war because we're degrading Russian troops and in a way that will you know, undermine their superpower status or whatever they have left of that. Has that view been exterminated within the Biden administration?
I get the sense that most of the people in the Biden administration are willing to start winding things down. It's the vibe I get from the overall administration. Look, Mark Milley, chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, has been basically saying that for 8 months, 7 months. You know, but on that point, by the way, the war has also led Russia to ramp up its munitions building infrastructure. I think tanks and artillery shells and everything are rolling off the assembly line in Russia the way they haven't for decades. So I'm not sure this was a big win in that regard, but
something we don't seem to be all that capable of doing, since we're running low on munitions. And Biden,
well, that's
people said that Biden said he was going to send them the cluster bombs because that way we didn't have to send them more conventional bombs, and we were running low on them.
Well, it's artillery shells, and we are running low. We've ramped
artillery
our
shells.
monthly production up to 24,000. It was like 14 or something a year ago, a month. And that is the reason. Yeah. I mean, first of all, we have some of these cluster munitions in stock. And secondly, I assume that it's like one of these artillery shells. I mean, certainly if you're shelling like soldiers in trenches, I assume one of these is worth several regular ones, because one of these shells spreads 72 grenades in effect over several acres. And, go ahead.
Right. No, clearly they wouldn't do this if Ukraine was winning the offensive. Isn't that true? Or are you thinking about it? I mean, it was taken by some strategists as a clear sign that the counteroffensive was failing, that they needed these morally very questionable weapons.
Certainly, if it was just a rout, if it had succeeded wildly, they probably wouldn't be worried right now in the same way about artillery. Yeah, it's a sign probably that things aren't going great. And as for the question of cluster munitions, so by the Army's own account, first of all, what they're doing, you would think violates a law. There's a U.S. law that says you can't deploy cluster munitions if the dud rate is higher than 1%. That is, if the number of the little grenades that don't explode upon initial deployment is higher than 1%. Well, the Pentagon's own claim is that these are at 2.5%, which would mean that basically, like for the average artillery shell, you got 2 of these now live grenades sitting around. But the New York Times reported that number is way low, and it's more like 8 or 9%. So you're talking about the average artillery shell leaving 6 or something, basically hand grenades that could go off if handled. And, Michael Kaufman was making a point. I mean, he's for the cluster munitions, but it turns out this isn't just a problem for generations of children to come, that although it's true that for decades these are dangerous, but it's a problem for Ukrainian troops when they follow up an artillery barrage, because it means that the field, if it happens to be a field that wasn't mined, now suddenly in effect it is a field that was mined.
Interesting.
So
I forget what I was going to say. Go ahead.
It's about all I have to say, I think, about Ukraine. So we can get back to the fact that Ron DeSantis smells like a loser, or to threads.
Biden gave an interview with Fareed Zakaria.
I didn't listen to it. Did you listen to the whole thing?
I listened to parts of it.
Did he seem impressive and articulate?
Impressive is a big word. He seemed articulate. He was the same old pompous blowhard who thinks he's smarter than he is. He always was, but he was not. There were no signs of visible decline in his thinking. He was able to express his pompous blowhardy phrases, and false, brilliant grand strategies, or as clearly as he ever could. A little slower, but the idea that he's incompetent to be president seems to be wrong. And that, coupled with a poll, an article in the Washington Post that my friend Ryan Jerdusky pinpointed, which is the Democrats need Biden because he has a peculiar hold on white working class voters, and they make up 30% of the vote the Democrats get. I thought that was a stunningly high number, but it was backed up by the Pew poll, which says they're 27%. So they're a good chunk of the Democratic coalition, and if they lose that, they're toast.
What are they of the Republican coalition? Like 60?
Yeah, something like that, or more. It was either more of the Republican coalition. I don't know. I just looked at the Pew poll 10 minutes ago, but I didn't get a number. But it was a bigger bar graph. Anyway, and they're not going to turn out for Gavin Newsom. Okay, Gavin Newsom is an upper class dude. You want. Okay, so it's they're not going to turn out for Dave McCormick. They might eventually turn out for J.D. Vance, although I think even he has a hurdle to overcome with them. Being of course,
as you may know, he's not a Democrat.
He's not a Democrat. Good point. Yeah. I just think it out loud. Yeah. Not a Democrat yet, Bob. He's
is he moving that direction? I must have missed something.
He's teaming up with Elizabeth Warren to regulate banks.
Oh, good. What about Chris Murphy? Anyway. How would Chris Murphy play with white working class? Better than Gavin Newsom?
I don't know.
Better than Gavin
Newsom. But Biden has a history, and he's moderate. He seems they know who he is. He's made an effort to be where they are, and so this implies that the Democrats are stuck with Biden.
What about Gretchen Whitmer? Obviously, not someone who is willing to surrender on this.
She had a big moment in the sun because Politico wrote a puffer about him that I was primed to hate, but it was actually quite informative.
About Gretchen Whitmer?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't go into her substance. Basically, under her leadership, the Democrats have got the trifecta. They have control of both houses of the legislature and the governorship, and they've done that. They've sort of passed their state version of Build Back Better. So I think they have a Michigan refundable child tax credit. They don't have the power to grant amnesty. They only hit one of my two buttons, but they've passed their liberal agenda. Okay. My bet is if we go back to Michigan 5 years from now, the state will not be appreciably improved because of this agenda, but she's given it her shot. Maybe she's right. The interesting thing was the Congressional Black Caucus was lobbying her to run. Okay. Maybe the members from Michigan, but that implied to me that if suppose Biden wanted to substitute her for Kamala, maybe the Black Caucus wouldn't be that as pissed off as people think. Maybe Black voters would be, maybe other groups would be, but there'd be sort of a path that if they really wanted to exercise leadership, they could say, okay, we like this woman. I don't know, at least she's a woman, she's not Black. So she's a live possibility, I think. Also, she's much better looking now than she was 2 years ago. So obviously she's getting into campaign shape. That's a sure test of whether somebody is really running or not. She's ready for her close. She's ready for her close-up.
That's all good. It's hard to imagine Biden replacing Kamala. I think
I thought they could.
Although, Kamala, it's not like she has a lot of support on the left. The far left doesn't like her. And I don't know who does.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, there are groups on the left that will just complain about anything they find to complain about. And if they deep six Kamala, that would be something to complain about. People who are totally invested in identity politics and nothing else. I thought they missed a bet. They could have pinned the cocaine on Kamala.
Is it too late? Is it too late? Should we start?
It's too late.
Rumor?
They closed the investigation today. Bizarrely. You can take drugs into the White House, and we just have no. I mean, it's sort of plausible in that there's less to the White House than you think. In other words, people thought there were Nike missiles that were going to come out of the lawn and shoot any intruding helicopter. And some guy actually did jump the fence and run to the White House, and it turned out all they had was a dog. Okay, and they didn't release the dog because they were worried he would do him harm. So the guy got into the White House. So there's less to White House security than you think.
Maybe the deal is if somebody
everywhere, it's not implausible.
Maybe if somebody breaches the perimeter, they give all the Secret Service agents stimulants, and that's what the cocaine is for. That could be the plan.
There you go. I thought cocaine was the drug of yesterday. Why not fentanyl? Why not ayahuasca? Why not something?
Oh, well, those are no. These are high productivity people. These are people working late.
Adderall.
Well, I imagine
Adderall
there is a little
cocaine.
of that.
I would rather be governed by Adderall than cocaine.
Yeah, but then you got to wait for it to kick in. You know,
I'm not speaking from personal experience, but my impression is that cocaine gives you a lot of energy, but destroys your judgment.
It does. Have you ever noticed that
when you've been edited by people on cocaine, you don't want to be edited by people on cocaine. People on Adderall, maybe another question.
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but the NFL running backs who were reputed to be doing cocaine had a tendency to fumble. There's a certain overconfidence problem associated with the drug. And maybe this could become a theory that explains some sort of White House behavior or policy, but we'll put that off till next week. Our grand unified theory of cocaine.
They're going to need more than a dime bag.
So what you want to talk more about, like horse race politics, or what else? We could talk about Threads. I noticed
we get about Thread. You wanted to talk about Mr. Luft?
No, I thought that was Parrot Room at most. I don't know. I was assuming you were paying attention to Mr. Luft, and so I forwarded you my friend's theory about Mr. Luft, and it turned out you weren't that conversant. Mr. Luft. I'll read up on him between now and the Parrot Room. I mean, who the hell is he? You tell me. Who is he? He's
a shady operator who runs a shady think tank and is now one of the people claiming to have evidence that Joe Biden is on the take.
Right.
And anyway, we could talk about it. My putative conspiracy theory that says the press is going to start ganging up on Biden. There were no data points this week, I think, that I could point to. Peggy Noonan wrote a column where she said the Democrats should clearly replace Biden. And she obviously hadn't read this white working class poll, but she implied that they were all too scared of the power of the White House to destroy their careers to say it in public. And that led me to think, but the media isn't scared. So the media is going to have to lead the way on this. There's going to be no Chris Christie in the Democratic Party who comes out and says, Joe Biden's too old. He's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He has to go. But the media did not lead the way this week.
There was a time a few months ago when I had the sense that the media that the New York Times was like, they ran a story like,
There was one. There was one.
What was
Maureen Dowd pronounced judgment on the 7th grandkid. She said, Joe, you have 7 grandkids. You can't disown this one just because it's a stripper who Hunter doesn't even remember having sex with, supposedly. And that is sort of when you lose Maureen Dowd. I mean, that sort of, I think, spoke for the tenor of the whole media. Then Ann Coulter wrote a very interesting column saying, wait a minute, since when do we valorize and completely accept illegitimate children of women who may be gold diggers and want the Biden name to pass to their children? I mean, we want marriage. That means you have to, if you're gonna respect marriage, that means you have to disrespect kids out of marriage. And she had a point. That used to be the rule. Isn't the rule anymore. But Ann Coulter does not control the media.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about columnists,
Maureen Dowd sort of does.
Right, but if you want to talk about columnists at the Times, Michelle Goldberg's been saying he should be replaced for months and months and months.
But she's
not the same weather vane for kind of centrist,
correct.
MSM thought that Maureen Dowd is. No, but
Maureen Dowd is the Supreme Court of the media, and I think Biden has lost that appeal. And I predict he will have to in some way acknowledge his grandkid. Doesn't have to invite her to the family picnic, but he'll say something like "Life is complicated and she's a lovely little girl, and we wish her all the best.
And we hope to meet her someday."
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. But,
so
as for the white working class, I still say you got to factor in all the people who will be watching debates, assuming there are debates, And they'll either be watching Biden and Trump and going, man, I really can't talk myself into showing up at the polls for this Biden guy because he won't be able to keep up with Trump, I think, in real time in certain respects. And, compare that to them watching any number of other Democrats and going, yeah, that would be better than Trump. That would be better than Trump. I think that's yeah.
If they saw the Biden at the Fareed Zakaria interview, I don't think they would say that. I think they say this guy's okay now. We don't know how he's going to be in 4 years.
Much less challenging.
He'll do it for now.
Much less challenging format, and it doesn't last an hour and a half or whatever. But we'll see.
Good point. The Chris, there are a bunch of candidates who are having a moment. Chris Christie is having a moment. Peggy Noonan wrote that Christie could easily beat Biden. I disagree. Christie has a lot of baggage, and he's basically a self-centered jerk, but not incompetent. And Tim Scott is having a moment on the Republican side. It's going to be it's in DeSantis' interest that the press cycle through all these people. Thank God they haven't gotten to Nikki Haley yet, but they will. And then once they've all petered out, DeSantis can have his comeback. The conventional wisdom is now it's Iowa or bust for DeSantis. I don't buy that either.
When is Iowa?
Just January 15th.
Oh, God. That's a long time.
Well, yeah, the election is not this year, it's next year. But less time than you think.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's the state of the race, I think.
So this Threads thing.
Dukakis is...
Yeah.
Sorry, Dukakis. I said Dukakis. I said Dukakis
now there's
instead
a
of
dark
DeSantis.
horse. There's a dark horse.
Dukakis instead of DeSantis was definitely a bad slip.
Yep. Maybe.
Never mind.
Maybe DeSantis needs to sit on a tank with a tank helmet on.
He cut an ad about the border that actually was very good. He seemed okay. He didn't seem awkward or, cackling inappropriately or on
somebody was saying, I don't think we talked about this last time, was that it's something like Trump. With Trump, you get, it was that, it was a column by somebody in the New York Times who linked to that bizarro video by a Republican congressman where he wished people a happy 4th of July. And he was smiling and he was saying, the leftists are coming to get you. And he was kind of intertwining that kind of stuff with happy 4th. We have a great country. The leftists are coming to get you and so on. And the point was Trump captured both the rage and the joy. There was joy in Trump. You go to a Trump rally and they laugh and they this and they that. And he said, DeSantis, you just get the rage. You don't get the joy. And that's his problem. Who was it? It was one of these. Was it? Does David French now have a Times column? Maybe it was him.
Yes. Everybody has a Times column, Bob.
Really?
We're the outliers here. We're the outliers here. Have you checked your email? You may.
I may.
In the future, everybody will have a Times column. That's Andy Warhol's corollary. Somebody did say that, and I think that's true. DeSantis can have a little bit of joy, but nothing like Trump. So there's, but my line is if he's relatively joyous with a tiny bit of humor and competent, that might win the day. He just can't be negative. People can't think he's an asshole. And I don't think he's an asshole. Or if they think he's an asshole, they can think we need an asshole. People thought Giuliani was an asshole, but,
they thought we needed the kind of asshole Trump was. But that was an asshole with joy.
Yeah. I claim that Maggie Haberman is tilting back toward Twitter. She claims she can do both Twitter and Threads. I think she's the bellwether. She's the deciding vote on whether the political writers who we follow, who are a tiny portion of the audience and the customers for Twitter and Threads, will stay on Twitter or go to Threads.
Well, you know what? Who somebody said was the bellwether, and this is going to hurt you doubly, both the person who said it and who they said the bellwether was.
Ezra Klein.
They said the bellwether was Ezra Klein. He dropped out of Twitter a while ago and he's on Threads. And then I think the person who said it was Ben Smith, your nemesis. He's not. You're supposed to say
well,
he's not my nemesis.
He is a good bellwether for the left, for leftist beyond passant thinking. Yeah, I'm sorry, that just slipped out.
That kind of, yeah.
He thinks for himself now. He's been innovative and creative.
Plus, he's a god among men. But he was just commenting, I think, today on Threads. I personally have done just one. I mean, what do you call them? Threads is such a bad name because you can't call them Threads, because Threads already means multiple tweets. You can't say on my thread. You can say on my post. Somebody said you should say Stitch. That doesn't work.
I can't even get around Threads. I mean, if you say I now want to see what Ezra Klein wrote. If you gave me my cell phone here and asked me to find Ezra Klein's thread, I couldn't find it. I don't know how to navigate it. No, it's impossible.
It's weird. I was suggesting last week that the reason they still don't have a web version, so you still can't use a physical keyboard on this site, is that they wanted to discourage old people. But I now think, I mean, first of all, their claim is we just haven't had time to do these things. We'll get these features out. Now, some of these features they don't yet have are like a chronological follower feed, a feed where, now here's how sophisticated this algorithm would be, Mickey, that they just haven't had time to put together. It's people you follow in the order in which their tweets or posts have shown up. Gosh, how many people do we need to put on that job to get it done? This is crazy. This is bullshit.
Well, they obviously want
to launch with that feature.
They want their algorithm to run anything, right? So it becomes like TikTok and Instagram, a pile of celebrity and creator and influencer dreck. I don't think Ezra Klein will want to be part of that pile of dreck.
Yeah, but remember, if it's an algorithm designed to magnify the influence of like big shots, he's a big shot. It'll work for him. If it's like big brands and it's like, the Jake Tappers, and I think to some extent that's what it is. Although there's something more than that. I was Harry McCracken, who knows his tech, was saying, this is one of the few exchanges I've had on Threads, that there's some kind of special sauce they've got beyond a TikTok-like algorithm, because he is seeing a fair number of things by people he knows. And I noticed you got some real engagement on some, whatever you call these things.
Really?
Posts. Yeah, the one where you quote tweeted something. It was sarcastic, which is a rarity on Threads. Threads is a relatively earnest and civil place. I can't track it down. That's
I
mocked
them for saying they were going to have.
I
mocked them for saying they were going to have sponsored content. I thought I did that on Twitter, not Threads. Maybe I did it on both.
You had one on Threads that did not that badly. I mean, given the number of followers, on a per follower basis, it was like 100 times what you're getting on Twitter. Seriously. I mean, it was like,
it was hundreds of times?
No, on a per follower basis. You have like 40,000 Twitter followers, 100 Threads followers.
Right.
And yet this got like, I don't know, 30 likes or something, That's like a jillion likes on Twitter. Now. You love Threads.
I love Threads.
And Threads loves you, Mickey. But let me just finish. So there's, no follower feed, which they could do in a nanosecond if they wanted it. And it'll eventually show up just to prove they're not lying. But it's obviously part of the strategy not to launch with it. No web version, no desktop version. And I think the big question is, what is the mix of motives? I mean, I read to you that quote where the guy who runs it said, we don't want political stuff, basically. And that could be because they don't want the incivility. They don't want, assuming it's true. But I think it's also, I think you put together like the follower count, the can't do it with a physical keyboard. And I think, you're kind of excluding a certain type of Twitter user who's like a really intensive user, but they're not passive users, right? They don't just read the stuff. They don't just lurk. They generate a lot of their own stuff, but they don't themselves have huge followers. I think you're right. Let me read you. this is by a guy named
it's much safer for them to be apolitical. Other people governments try to get them to censor things, and they'd rather just sit there and make money. I don't know what does Mark Zuckerberg want to do? He wants to recover his reputation from the pathetic failure of the metaverse. So this helped that.
He wants to make money. He wants to dominate.
He rushed it out sort of at Musk's moment of weakness before all this stuff was in place, obviously.
Well, no, again, I think some of this they didn't want to launch with, but it's probably, it is said to be true. He seized the moment. Like Musk did this thing where you were limited on the number of tweets you could see each day, and he wanted to seize that moment, so he launched early. That part is apparently true. I think it's misguided because, first of all, how many people did that affect? I mean, I don't think there were many people reaching that limit on Twitter, honestly. And secondly, Musk does something stupid every week. There's going to be a blunder next week. Wait for the next blunder and have all your features in place, ready to launch. Let me just read. It's also possible
that Musk will do 3 smart things in a row and Twitter will grow.
It could happen. Hasn't happened yet.
The idea that Twitter is collapsing is one of the 3, I think, bogus media narrative threads that are being pushed. They claim that Twitter's collapsing, gays are fleeing Florida, and DeSantis is collapsing. The only one that is remotely plausible, I think, is the third one. It's the third one. And I don't think that's true either.
Well, Twitter, we'll see. It's hanging in there. I mean, I heard this traffic is down 5% since Threads. That's not that much. And
meanwhile, Fox is down 31% since last year. So the idea that firing Tucker, they've proved they don't need Tucker. I don't think they've done that.
Plus, they've got another defamation suit, thanks to Tucker, coming up. His legacy lives on at Fox in the form of ongoing defamation lawsuits. Just quickly, the rest of that quote from the guy who runs Threads was, the goal isn't to replace Twitter. The goal is to create a public square for communities on Instagram that never really embraced Twitter, and for communities on Twitter and other platforms that are interested in a less angry place for conversations, but not all of Twitter. I will say that Ezra and some other people are having a serious conversation about why it is so civil. As if there is something smart they're doing with the algorithm, and I don't know. They understand this better than I do. So, but we'll see. It's early days.
Zuckerberg, he has ways of making you nice. It's like a fog of anesthesia that comes over people. It makes the sites incredibly boring, and they have no edge at all. And on Facebook, the obvious thing is it lets you delete dissenting tweets. So I say, Bob Wright, you're full of shit. You can just delete that tweet. All of a sudden, the experience is nice again. You can't do that on Twitter. I don't know how they deal with it on Instagram, but it's like I don't know. They're the Budweiser of social platforms.
This is Budweiser after the trans ad or before the trans ad?
Before. There's non-woke beer now, Bob. I only drink non-woke beer.
What brand is that?
I think it's called Ultra Right Beer.
Is that an actual name? Anchor Steam is going out of business, right?
I know somebody's trying to start. Everything has been polarized. I've got to start using non-woke toothpaste after this podcast, Bob.
Better before than after.
Unfortunately, I drive a woke car.
Remind us.
As a Subaru.
That's right. Subaru is about love.
It's about love, especially lesbians.
They should add that to their ad. Finally, so the alarm went off, so we got ahead of the Parrot Room. But I want to quote this guy, Ben Cohen, not the Ben Cohen of ice cream fame, but whoever on Threads. He quoted all the stuff said by the Threads guy that I've now quoted and said, in other words, we're building a platform we think brands, celebrities, influencers will adopt to create fake communities that they can monetize. And that's more or less your view, right?
I don't know if they're fake communities, but they're sort of force-fed communities. They may play on real, sentiments among people. If you start a Taylor Swift community, it's not going to be a fake community. It's going to be a real community in a big way. But it's not a political community. It's not a.
Anyway,
it's not a.
It's early days, and having 100 million followers, or however many they have now, or 100 million people on your app, it's not the same as them all being active, and I don't know what those numbers are like. So we'll see. I agree, Twitter's a long way from dead. When you're there, it seems like there's a fair number of people on it.
Yeah, it hasn't done anything for my traffic, but it hasn't killed it either. It's about the same as it was 6 months ago, which is okay.
On the other hand, last thing I'll say about Elon Musk continues to prove that he is a petty child rather than a smart tactician. He still is antagonizing systematically everyone who has a Substack newsletter. Okay. He still has disabled the social media display that used to show up automatically, the way it does for all other media outlets, when you put the URL on Twitter. He's still punishing us for back when he thought that Substack Notes was a threat. And by the way, I would encourage people to check out Substack Notes. That's kind of a nice social media site. But, it would obviously, at this point, when he's actually worried about migration to Threads, when you look at all the people who have Substack newsletters, including Matt Iglesias, and how many followers they have on Twitter, you would think he would want to be on good terms with them at this moment, and for them to find Twitter an actually helpful place to circulate their content, wouldn't you?
I agree. I mean, their videos won't play. You do a video on Substack and you put it on Twitter, and it has an arrow, but you hit the arrow and nothing happens.
Well, that's a malfunction. This is tactical stupidity.
It isn't. Why do you think it's a malfunction? I don't think it's a malfunction.
Wait, he's systematically disabling videos?
It's a Substack video. Yes. I think I
didn't know there was such thing as a Substack video.
Ann Coulter has a Substack video. If you click on the arrow in her Twitter feed, it will not run.
Or maybe it's a Substack URL.
There are all sorts of weird things. It's telling Twitter's
incredible.
now telling me I muted people who I didn't mute, and the one thing it does is every now and then I will write a post and it won't post it; it'll lose it.
And
I used to learn to respect its editorial judgment. I would say, well, that really wasn't a very good post.
Sign from God.
It was right.
Yeah,
it was right. It was a sign from God, and I accepted it. But Lady has been doing it so often, I think it's the editor is now on cocaine, and I don't trust it anymore.
Or Satan, or Elon Musk.
I reposted. Why is he's launched a new artificial intelligence initiative?
Oh, that's right. XAI or something.
To compete with I guess ChatGPT, and why is his more benign than ChatGPT? Have you figured that out?
It doesn't exist yet. But one thing we can talk about in the Parrot Room.
That's certainly more benign.
One thing we can talk about in the Parrot Room is this Claude put out by Anthropic AI, which a bunch of people who profess to be deeply concerned about AI safety. Some of them are exiles from Open AI, or they chose to leave Open AI. And then there's also this Pi thing, which I've started fooling around with a little from Inflection. There's a lot of AI stuff. We can talk about AI on Parrot Room. What else are we going to talk about?
What do you mean a Pi thing? You mean there's a site called
the
Pi?
The name of it is PI. The name of the AI assistant is Pi. PI. I think it may stand for personal intelligence or something. It wants to be your all-purpose single thing that does everything for you. Gives you counseling when you're down. Schedules your airline reservations.
Books you a 5-star hotel trip to Tuscany.
Correct.
Gives you the money to take that trip.
It will, yes.
Well, we have a lot of stuff for the Parrot Room. I mean,
what is it?
This hour didn't have a lot of stuff, but that's because I was holding everything off because it was like not quite big enough to talk about in the blockbuster free segment. But we have good question.
The aforementioned Gal Luft.
We have Luft. We have. I have more things to say about Klaatu's speech in the day the Earth stood still. there's an obvious irony that we were missing. There's something to say about diversity that I realized. There's Richard Hanania's defense of the Canadian euthanasia policy, assisted suicide policy, which seemed weird. And
you have a long-standing euthanasia phobia. We'll discuss all this.
We have Israel to talk about. I don't quite understand why Netanyahu would be scared of an administration reassessment. Tom Friedman seems to say there's this terrifying thing called a reassessment that's going to, that Netanyahu shouldn't want. And I also don't understand why what Netanyahu is doing is so awful. You'll explain that to me.
I can help you with that. At least some of them.
And there are a bunch of other little things.
Okay,
there's Michael Lind wrote a pretty good piece on why we need more elites. Anyway.
Okay, so I talk a little more about the Russians with attitude thing that hasn't aired yet on their podcast. Silo, I want to talk about the last. You don't mind if I do a plot spoiler about the last episode of Silo, right? You're just.
I saw the last. I watched it.
Oh,
last
you did.
night.
Okay, we'll talk about that. The guy who brought us the AMC Pacer died, and I know you'll want to talk about that. I've been a small measure of vindication on China, on something I said decades ago that some people have claimed has been disproven. I want to persist a little in complaining about the very inspiring Alan Arkin speech that you praise. We'll continue that tedious conversation, which this will be the
not
third
tedious for me.
Yeah, I know, because you like to enjoy watching me lose my cool. It's not going to happen this time.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
We'll see. The night is young.
Trust me. And then some of that AI stuff, maybe a little bit about Anthropic and anything else. Yeah.
Washington Examiner wrote a very good editorial about this horrible judicial decision that is at the bottom of our inability to deal with the homeless problem, at least here in California.
Okay. All right. So Parrot Room is patreon.com/Parrot Room. Right.
Right. I'm going to talk about all the out of wedlock children I fathered.
That
and whether
we should lead with that.
We should have them on the podcast.
We should lead with that. Now, this is like the Hunter type, like strippers you don't even remember.
Right.
Uh-huh.
If I did
what
it,
can
I
you
certainly
say?
don't remember.
What can you say if you don't even remember? You wish them well.
Maybe I should. It's true. I was in such a fight. I should put out an all points bulletin saying, "Please come forward," and claim part of the vast cow's fortune.
Well, our audience is so big that there's a pretty good chance some of them are watching. I mean, we're talking about the intersection of two very large populations here, chances are there's overlap. Okay.
It's true.
Patreon.com/Parrot Room, right? See there.
Right. Wait.
You got to show them the bird. I mean, why else would they come?
What about my grandchildren?
Okay. There's more of that in the Parrot Room, folks.